First, good morning, everyone. I know it's post-coffee break, so I hope everybody's comfortable out there. Thank you for coming to hear what we have to say today. This has been an amazing journey over the last year that we've been on, and I'd like to sort of do a little bit of housekeeping at the beginning. So it's just about a year since we had our first meeting at an HL7 work group session with the idea of could we do something Argonaut-like between payers and providers. Just over a year ago, we had our first initial sort of proof of concept meeting right before the Data Quality Summit for NCQA here in DC. And in January, we formed Da Vinci as an organization. And just like ONC is doing the work for P2, HL7 has provided a home for these competitors and collaborators to be able to work together towards the greater good. And so I'd like to put my thanks out to Chuck Jaffe and his team because they've been amazing support, and the FHIR community has been really welcoming us with open arms with the work that we're trying to do, and as we work as an industry project, providing feedback into the standards process. And I think that's critically important because I think that we're at an inflection point as an industry on really being able to change and to overcome a lot of the existing challenges around clinical data sharing. And it's only with the sort of efforts and work of the really awesome, smart people I get to work with on Da Vinci on a day-to-day basis that we're able to make this forward progress with their funding, but more importantly with the in-kind support. So I'd like to start with just can I get a hand raise from anybody in the room that has been involved with Da Vinci as a SME, as a technical resource, or P2, just so folks have an understanding of just here in DC today, how many folks are actively helping us figure this out on a day-to-day basis, and it cuts across organizations and functional areas in the industry, so thank you. So why are we here? Just in case you didn't get it before, there are shared notes if you've got open questions, or I've got some links in here if you want to be able to pull up content while we're talking. I'll pause here for a moment. Thank you, Stefan. So I included our antitrust policy in all the slide decks when I do public presentations because I want to be clear that everything that we're creating here from a Da Vinci project perspective is available for anyone to use. And we're working and getting better at getting things into work group at HL7 as part of the implementation guide process building, but that the goal is that there's no IP, this is literally about how to get people to talk table stakes to each other on a day-to-day basis. And Stefan's already talked about, really in order to make value-based care work, we had a number of thought leaders from the industry. Our current chair for our steering committee, Sagrid Moodley, has been an awesome thought leader and convener and dragger of people to get across sort of IP issues to the table when we were convening back in January. And it's through individuals like that we've been able to really get the acknowledgement that in order for the power of FHIR to succeed in setting standards for how this data that's so critical for value-based care to work, to be successful, is that it needs to be standardized at the use case level. And so we're doing everything really looking at use cases specifically surrounding value-based care. I'll talk a little bit more about the specific use cases that we're starting with in a moment. And that our goal as a project team is to simply build an implementation guide around a specific use case, eat our own dog food by using that, by building reference implementations of each side of the API for folks to be able to test against in sandboxes, and then be able to make that available for folks to pick up and use and to drive into pilots. We're focused on the building. We're really looking for you as the community to be the folks that come, pick it up, give us feedback on it, help us evolve it as we get the first draft standards out. So the reason I include this slide when I'm presenting isn't that people don't understand what value-based care is. I think the important point to make here is that this really, with the shift to focusing on value and outcomes, not that it's always been the intent for folks to make sure that patients are getting the best care and we're focused on outcomes, but if you look at all the constraints on payers and providers on a day-to-day basis, it essentially lifts focusing on outcomes to an equal partner in the triple aim, and I think that this is something that we're seeing really the focus on being able to get clinical data exchanged at the right point in time and context for folks becomes really critically important, and we're now seeing the resources free up to make that happen in reality from a business and ROI perspective from our partners. And I think that another sort of inflection that's happening is we're starting to acknowledge that being able to understand an individual patient's benefit at the point of service with that patient is part of their clinical solution. So getting that content out of the back office and in front of care providers when they're making decisions is critically important if we're really going to change things prospectively versus trying to understand things archivally through things like claims. And I think the other sort of arrest that I do when we talk about this is, as a team, I think that we're very frank about the fact that we're an industry that's in transition. We're moving people from fee-for-service to value-based care, but that the provider organizations that we're all working with on a day-to-day basis are going to be in dual mode for a significant amount of time, and that we need to acknowledge that. And that when we look at the tools that we need to provide them, we need to make that bar as low as possible and as easy as possible for providers to start to get across that transom and shift the way their practices behave to be successful in value-based care versus fee-for-service. This is just a breakdown of what the organization looks like, the membership looks like. And I candidly think that if back in February when we were first convening, if we got 8 to 10 people, we thought we were going to be doing awesome and we'd get 1 or 2 use cases done. And we are blown away by the interest from the market. I typically at this point in time say, if you've sent me an email in the last 6 months and I've ignored you, please don't take it personally. We're just hyper-focused on trying to get done what we're getting done and working for ways to get folks to engage and be able to pilot and use the implementation guides that we're building. Some of the smartest people in the industry are getting to spend time with us on a day-to-day basis, and it's a privilege to be able to spend time with all of you folks. So these are the use cases. Just looking at the picture here, there could be 1,000 use cases that we pick from when we look at this domain. This work actually came out of the initial parties that were involved prioritizing where their critical pain points were today, and also some work that had been done at HL7 in a series called Partners Interoperability, where very smartly the leadership team at HL7 brought industry leadership in to talk about how could we use technologies to resolve business problems. So we actually started with our first use case was literally collecting the data around 30-day medication reconciliation post-discharge, a quality measure, a single quality measure, to prove out that we could really build one of these IMP guides. And working with the folks at HL7 that own that context, the work group that we worked with, we were able to say, well, this really should be a framework in which to contain quality measures, just to give you an idea of sort of how things are evolving as we really dig in and get involved in working on an individual use case. The next 2 use cases, so the 2 brown use cases are the things that basically have already have a ballot, have been balloted and are on flight to be draft standards. They're going through ballot reconciliation right now. So anyone in the room could pick up one of these ballots, and there's links in this presentation that will allow you to get to them. And then we've got progress underway with 2 new use cases, documentation and templates and rules, and e-health record exchange. So CRD, coverage requirements, is really about understanding are there predecessor tasks I need to do before I order something, send a patient someplace, exposing that to the care team so that they understand that there's additional work to be done, or that there maybe is a redirect or an opportunity to do something at a different site of care or another step that they need to process. Documentations and templates and rules is really about being able to give that same clinical staff information about if you're going to do something, here is how you would document it so that when you go to apply for payment later, you actually meet the documentation requirements, telling people what the rules are up front so that they can make decisions about what they need to do for a particular patient, and then if necessary, move on to the traditional authorization workflow. E-health record is actually split into 3 vectors. One vector is building the next set of quality measures in that first bucket, adding more quality measures to DEQM, which is what the framework is for the quality measures. The second workflow is provider to payer exchange, and the third workflow is payer to provider exchange. And that's actually something that's come from our provider community about, tell me now that I'm in an at-risk contract with someone, what is it that you know about this patient that I don't? give me the payer health record. And we think that that's really game-changing and really is going to allow us to, I think, provide value to those providers. And again, what is it that we can do to make it as easy as possible for providers to onboard to start to exchange this data? The remaining use cases are things that we're evaluating for 2019. You'll see authorization support there and gaps in care we have queued up for the beginning of the year. I just did a pivot on this. We've been having some conversations across our steering committee about the relationship between the use cases. That what we found is, from a prioritization perspective, is there's a little bit of a, you need to do one thing before you do another, like we found with the data quality measures, and like we're seeing with the work around sort of those pre-steps to authorization. And so they're sort of ordered. It's a little bit of a work in progress, but the idea is that basically you're doing baby step one, adding on to it, and continue to add value. Our focus is really around minimally viable, right? What does the API need to support so that it's actually going to add value to somebody in workflow? This is a view at who the current members are. So I'm going to flip between these two for a second. Folks have been able to join at different levels. The folks that have joined at higher levels actually have the ability to bring provider organizations in with them to our operating committee. And again, the support and the interest and the in-kind resources that come out of these organizations on a day-to-day basis is really overwhelming. There's actually a link in the presentation, or if you just Google members Da Vinci HL7, it'll bring you right to a page that will actually have all of these logos on it. And we weren't able to talk about this for a really long time, so I'm excited to actually be able to give everybody credit for the hard work that they've done now that we got all the paperwork out of the way and all the right signatures. So I mentioned the use cases themselves. As you can see, we have work that's in flight. We'll be moving in 2004 to closing out the existing 2 draft use cases, getting all of the ballot comments reconciled, and be doing incremental releases, as I mentioned before, on each use case. And then as we look at document templates and coverage rules and eHealth record, our goal is to be able to get to ballot or be prepped with the right information in the implementation guide for the May ballot cycle at HL7. We're listening and looking for industry feedback as we bring these draft requirements into HL7 in the coming month, leading up to the January work group. And we anticipate across all 4 of these use cases that there will be opportunities for people to come and participate at the HL7 Connectathon, and we have plans to be at Connectathon at every HL7 work group and potentially be doing some virtual Connectathons and finding other opportunities in the market for us to give folks a chance to come and convene and share content. So this gives you a picture of sort of where we thought we would be about midway through this year. We thought that we would get MRP and CRD out and get them to ballot. We were able to, with the onslaught of interest, to be able to add an additional use case, which was the document templates use case. We made the decision to do that back in June. And then as late as September, we decided we had the funds, availability, and access to the technical resources, the SMEs in the market, to actually start the eHealth record exchange use case. So this is what next year's, I don't expect anybody to understand the acronyms on this, but just to give you an idea of sort of the scale of work that we're able to do with the funds that are available. Everyone on the team is really working sort of in a part-time capacity, sort of 10 to 15 hours a week, and then we're pulling on the resources from the payer and the provider and the HIT organizations to be able to give us access to their smart folks that really understand this business domain and the technical challenges involved, so that the work and the business requirements and the technical requirements that we're bringing into HL7 are really going to solve the real-world problems. So I'm going to hand this off to Viet, who's going to talk a little bit about how we're doing what we do, and